The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is defending his hardline approach to law and order issues despite concerns about legality. Scott Morrison wants to make it easier to strip Australian citizenship from anyone convicted of terrorism offences. The legal profession has questioned whether the changes are necessary and proportionate. Political reporter Henry Bello joins us now. So Henry, talk us through these laws and why the government believes they're necessary.
Well, the Prime Minister believes the laws as they stand at the moment are out of step with community expectations, and he's pointed to the Burke Street attack and a failed terror plot in Melbourne as one reason why to strengthen Australia's terrorism laws. Now, as it stands at the moment, the government can strip an Australian of their citizenship if they've been convicted of a terror offence, provided that they have spent 6 months in jail and that they are a dual citizen, that they have citizenship of another country. Now, the Prime Minister wants to lower that threshold so that you would be able to take away somebody's Australian citizenship, essentially deporting them if they've just been convicted, regardless of how long they've spent in jail, and reducing the threshold so that the government would need to be reasonably certain or reasonably satisfied that that person is eligible to be a citizen in another country. Now, that comes to the question of eligibility. So was that person born overseas? Did they have a parent who was born overseas? And would that mean that they would be able to apply for citizenship overseas? He says that the Australian public expect that people who've been convicted of terrorism offences shouldn't remain in this country. That terrorism is an attack not just on Australian citizens, but the very concept of citizenship itself. Now, does raise a few legal questions because one thing the government can't do is effectively render people stateless.
So, Henry, who's opposed to these laws and why?
Well, it's the legal community that's really leading the charge against these laws. The federal opposition says that it's considering them and it will respond in due course based on the merit of the proposal. Now, it's the Law Council that's really heading that. Their concern isn't really about punishing people that have been convicted of terrorism, but about due process. They say if you strip somebody of their citizenship, that actually reduces their power of appeal and their administrative processes. So what they're concerned about here is that there might not be due processes granted to these people, and that this might actually be an oversight that undermines the rule of law in a democracy. They say that's a very serious concern. The other concern that the Law Council is raising is that the government hasn't justified enough, in their view, why these changes to the law are necessary. We know that since these laws were introduced in 2015, about 9 people have been deported. The government, at least to this stage, hasn't said how many people it would want to deport who don't meet that minimum threshold. So they're calling for more of a public explanation and to justify how this would actually be done in accordance with the law and our international commitments. Now, the Prime Minister was asked about these concerns earlier today, and he said he's not bothered by them. Let's take a listen.
Those who oppose these laws always say this. I dealt with that back when I was Immigration Minister, and they said I couldn't turn back boats, and they said that wasn't legal. Well, you know, they make all these claims, but what I do is I press on and I just get it done.
And this may be setting up a political battle as well, because if Labor comes out and blocks these, then the government could accuse them of being soft on national security. They'll be mindful that there is a federal election coming up early next year.
Thanks, Henry.